Sometimes, maybe some of you have been up most of the night. You can't quiet yourself down. And he says, I remembered you, O God, and I groaned. I remembered you. The fact is, he says here that he's thinking about the good old days. I know I used to listen to the song a whole lot, but it's the song Glory Days. It's either by Bruce Springsteen or Billy Joel. Bruce Springsteen. You know, when he sings the song, Glory Days, remembers the days of glory from being the star in high school and being the star cheerleader and all that, and looking back to glory days, but those glory days never really fulfilling. The psalmist here says, God, I remember the days of old, the former days, the years gone by. I remember my songs, my heart mused, and my spirit inquired. Part of this is the fact that the psalmist is saying, when I look back, I wonder, where are you? You did it then. You helped me then. Why can't you do it now? I'm stuck in the cesspool of life. And by the psalmist is saying, in this first part of looking back, it's going to sound like he's sort of saying two different things as we keep going in the psalm, but he's not. But in this first part, he's saying, when he looks back, part of the looking back and the fact that he sees God brought him healing, it sort of makes his heart sad because the healing's not coming yet. And he wonders where God is now, today. The good old days. He goes on to ask 6 rhetorical questions. I think probably most of you know what a rhetorical question is. It's when you ask a question. You ask a question to your kid, do I need to tell you again to clean your room? Well, it's a rhetorical question. You're not looking for the kid to answer because you already know the answer. The psalmist here asks 6 rhetorical questions about God. And he says, will the Lord reject forever? And notice the words that he uses are the extreme. Will the Lord reject forever? Well, the psalmist is already with the rhetorical question, the way he's asking it. The answer is no. He won't reject forever. Will he never show his favor again? Yes, he will. Well, has his unfailing love vanished forever? Unfailing love, the idea of that Old Testament covenant, that relationship, that covenant between Abraham and Yahweh God, that covenant relationship that you and I fall underneath through Jesus Christ, the blood of Jesus Christ. That covenant, that agreement. The psalmist says, will his unfailing love covenant vanish forever? No, it won't. Has God promised? Has his promises failed for all time? No, they haven't. Has God forgotten to be merciful? No, he hasn't forgotten. Has he in his anger withheld his compassion? No, he's still given compassion to the psalmist. In the midst of his depression, in the midst of his dumps, in the middle of the night when he couldn't sleep, when he first starts off yelling at God, and then, I didn't bring it up, but verse 3, then when he gets quiet to listen to God, he asks the questions. And it brings him to a reality and back to a focus of who he is and whose he is. He says, then I thought, this is what I will appeal. The years of the right hand of the Most High. We've talked before how the right hand is the position of power. The psalmist is saying, I'm going to appeal to the right hand, the power of Yahweh God. I'm going to appeal to God's power. And I will remember. Okay, the first time, a couple verses earlier, when he remembers, it brings him sadness. Because he doesn't feel like God is working. Now, he says, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. I will remember those actions that God has done in my life. I will remember the practice, the inventions, the doings that God has. It's the positive power and favor of God. I would hope that within all of our lives, that when we're struggling with something, that we'd be able to look back and be able to say, wow, God, through that darkness of my life, you carried me. The whole poem of Footprints in the Sand. you don't know what the poem is, go home this afternoon and Google it if you get on computer. Footprints in the sand. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. I will remember your miracles of long ago. The miracles, the wonders, the fact that the things happen beyond our power and our control. The miracles of God. I will remember, I will meditate on your works. I will consider all of your mighty deeds. I will meditate. I will consider. I will talk. I will share. And it's interesting that the King James Version and the New King James Version also adds at the end of these verses, and I will talk of your deeds. So the psalmist is saying just not simply that, I'm going to remember what you did, God. I'm going to remember your deeds, your actions. I'm going to remember the miracles that you have brought me through. I will meditate and think about it. I will consider them, but I'm also going to talk about them. Remember about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I said that I'd love to have everybody in the congregation spend some time talking? Remember the Sunday I said that? A lot of people's heads went, everybody looked down, like, don't call on me. We all have a story to tell. We all have a story of how God has worked within our lives and moved us from where we are to where we are today. But the psalmist goes on here and says, in the process of remembering God, your ways, O God, are holy. Your ways, O God, are holy. What God is so great as our God? It's interesting that again, the King James up here for holy, most translations say, your ways, O God, are holy. King James, New King James says, your ways, O Lord, are in the sanctuary. Or I go to the sanctuary for you. I almost like that translation better. What do we tend to do if we start to feel depressed? Rhetorical question. We tend to, or when people come to talk to me, what's one of the things that I often will say to them is, what are you doing for yourself? Are you going out jogging or walking or running? How are you playing somehow? What type of diversions are you doing in some respects to remove some of that stress? Sometimes maybe I've focused, or many of us, we focus on that, the diversion, too much, than to focus on what the psalmist is saying here. What's the psalmist saying? When the psalmist is feeling depressed, when the psalmist is feeling all the stress, he says, when I remember what God has done in the past, His miracles and His deeds, I will go because He is holy, and I will go and be in worship. I will be in worship in His sanctuary, says the King James. Now I know for me that if I'm feeling stressed, a good run, a good bike ride, something physical, it can really change my mood, my attitude. And yet I know that the deeper change of attitude happens when I enter into worship and into praise. And crank up some good Christian music. So if you ever show up during the week and this place is rocking with loud music, Nelva will tell you, sometimes she's heard it before at her house next door, it's probably because there's something going on inside me. And I need some great loud Christian music rocking to be in praise. And the psalmist says, when we enter into that worship, into that holiness of God, we also realize how great is our God. That's a praise song. Great is our God. How great is our God? God's greatness is incomparable. Whatever you and I are going through, the struggles the psalmist is going through is incomparable to the greatness of God. He says, yet you are a God who performs the miracles. You display your power among the peoples. God, it is you. It is not what we do. God's power is visible. Look around. See, part of our struggle is we ask the question, why? Why is one person miraculously healed of cancer, and why now is Carol struggling so and possibly facing death? We look at that and say, well, why does God do one and not the other? And we do the questioning. Instead of saying, God, you are incomparable. Your power is visible within our lives.